Hi, this is Rochelle with Live in Vibrancy, and it's been a minute since I made a video. Some of it is my schedule, some of it is just I've been moving through some energy while I'm manifesting something that I'm in a little bit of resistance to, and some of it is my computer thinks my content is crap and has refused to save the last several videos. So fingers crossed it likes this one. So this video, I want to talk about why your mental diet might be holding you back. So I know that a comment like that is in direct contradiction with what you've been taught, right? That our inner conversations are the cause of the circumstances of our life. And that is a quote right out of Neville Goddard's Mental Diet. And that part is very true. But in this video, I want to talk a little bit about why some of the mass teachings might be slightly off the mark, and what you can do to really begin to see the change that you want by shifting your inner conversations, because it's about more than just the conversation. So if you find this video helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. And okay, let's get into it. All right, so as I said, our inner conversations as the cause of the circumstances of our life is actually true. But it is about more than just changing the conversation that's going on inside. The narrative you tell yourself about yourself is one of the most powerful parts of perception. And so it's not about just changing the words or the thoughts running through your mind. It's literally about changing the perceptions. I've talked about this in other videos, which I have linked in the description. But the common misconception is that your mental diet, as I said, is just about changing the thoughts. And so, like so many other people, I 100% have spent time flipping thoughts. And in areas I didn't have blocks, I absolutely saw results. But in those areas where maybe I had some barriers to creating what I wanted, that change wasn't happening just by shifting the inner conversation that I was having, because I was literally just shifting at the level of the thought. And that's because you manifest what you are, not what you want. And your mental diet is not just about changing the conversations. A negative mental diet is actually your resistance between the conscious desire and some way your subconscious is protecting you. And so your current perception of a situation actually tells you who you are believing that you are. It's telling you what you're believing about yourself in any moment. And so that perception is connected to an identity, a version of yourself that you are embodying in that moment. And so perception is a synonym for awareness and consciousness. Thoughts are not. They're a much higher, more surface level version. And so flipping thoughts and changing your mental diet, they don't shift you at the subconscious level. They don't shift you at the level of embodiment, and they don't shift you at the level of awareness and consciousness. So to quote Neville from another lecture where he goes a little more in depth, he says, and I quote, "If I do it and believe in the reality of it, it must produce in me a certain emotion. For if a thought is only a thought and doesn't produce some motor element, it doesn't work." That kind of shift happens at the level of perception. Neville also spoke of this, though the subtleties of his lectures can be lost in some of the mass teachings. Simply carry on these inner conversations from premises of fulfilled desire. Perception is the shape of the mind, and like a maze, it directs your thoughts. And that's why you can change your inner dialogue and find yourself having to change the same thoughts and conversations again and again and again. And so changing your inner dialogue is rarely helpful long term, especially when you're experiencing triggering circumstances. And I'm not saying by any means to just let that monkey mind run wild, because your brain is not designed to give you an objective picture of reality. It's responding to a lot of your natural survival responses. And so I am saying, instead of wrestling with your internal dialogue, which is trying to make change at the conscious level of the mind, the smallest and most level of mind, that observe your negative inner dialogue to understand the perception that's running. Your perception of the situation is a reflection of what you believe about yourself. So if you want to make real change to your mental diet, change your perceptions, because perception is at the level of identity. Paul tells us in his letter to the Ephesians, put off the former conversations which are corrupt. He calls it the old man. And be renewed in the spirit of your mind. Now he tells us, put on the new man, which is created in righteousness. Ephesians 4:22. Righteousness is right thinking, always in the direction of your fulfilled desire. That's right thinking. But to do that, you have to be willing to be objective enough to look at what's under the thoughts. The narrative you tell yourself about yourself, rather than a narrative about the external world, is the most powerful part of perception. The version of you who knows in faith that your manifestation is yours is different than the version of you that is keeping a mental diet trying to make something happen. Your mental diet is a reflection of your self-concept, and if you just flip it and push it away and change it, not only does it just rebound back again into the same pattern of thoughts, you actually rob yourself of the opportunity to really make significant and lasting changes to your self-concept. And so to make change at the level of identity, because we have many versions of self within, all those different voices in your head, all the different versions of yourself, these are conditioned versions that layer over and constrict the self of limitless possibility. And so the voice that you give weight to and accept as yourself depends on whatever emotions you're experiencing in that moment. And that is the self that you will embody. That is the state that you take on of that self. Your in alignment self lives under the doubtful feelings and the negative conversations of the voice connected to it. And just pushing that conversation away actually represses that part of yourself. But the way past your blocks to manifesting what you want is to go through them, focusing within to embrace the blocks, which just come up to protect you, and to move through them and live through your inherent expansive self and create what you want. And so what I'm saying is, what if instead of rejecting that part of you, you accept it and you use it to actually level up your self-concept? Because there's wisdom in your resistance. It's not just a thing to push into the shadow. In fact, that is what stops you. That is what they call toxic positivity. That is what they're calling spiritual bypassing. And sure, short term, that can get you somewhere. But I promise from experience that that is often what allows us to create something that we then quickly lose. So I'm going to end this with a little bit of talking about a different discussion. And now I don't recall exactly which lecture this is. I'm going to have to comb through my library. But there is a lecture over and above mental diet in which Neville really talks at the level of thought, more or less, about this, in which he's describing his wife changing her inner conversation about her boss to change the relationship she had with him. But in this other lecture that is not mental diet, which I cannot remember, but I'm going to try to look for it because I know it's in my library. He gave this lecture years later, and he divulges that the girl that he's talking about in mental diet is in fact his wife. And he goes into greater detail about the fact that his wife did not simply change the words in her head to change that inner conversation. She began to understand and untangle her perception of her boss and why she was having these mental conversations in order to begin to shift and change the conversation that showed up. She didn't simply change at the level of thought. She literally changed at the way she perceived her boss, therefore felt about her boss, and in doing so completely altered the way that her boss showed up in her life and the relationship that they had going forward. And so I want you to, again, take a look at your mental diet and understand, are you just changing at the level of thought? Because you might be changing and fighting for a long time if you are, because it's at the level of perception that change actually happens. And so, as I said, I hope this is helpful, and I really hope my computer is going to save this one. And if it did, I'm going to see you on YouTube.